Most of us spend our entire lives defending something we have never clearly met. A voice inside that says, "This is me. This is who I am. This must be protected." In Buddhism, this voice is often called the ego. And the first gentle truth is this: the ego is not something wrong with you. It is something learned. Asterisk in Buddhism. The ego is not treated as a villain to be defeated, but as a misunderstanding to be gently seen through. Many people hear the word ego and imagine arrogance, selfishness, or pride, yet the Buddhist understanding goes much deeper. The ego is simply the habit of believing there is a solid, separate me at the center of experience. It is the mental construction that says, "This is who I am, this is what defines me, and this must be protected at all costs." This belief is not a moral failure. It is a learned pattern, shaped by memory, conditioning, and survival. The Buddhist teaching invites us to look at this pattern with curiosity rather than aggression. When the ego is treated as an enemy, it tightens and resists. When it is met with awareness, it begins to loosen naturally. This is why Buddhism emphasizes understanding over suppression. The ego is not removed by force. It fades as clarity grows. As we observe thoughts, emotions, and reactions arising and passing away, it becomes clear that none of them are permanent or owned. The sense of self we defend is not a fixed entity, but a process. Realizing this does not diminish us. It frees us from unnecessary struggle and opens the door to a lighter, more compassionate way of being. Asterisk in Buddhism. Suffering is closely tied to the way we cling to a fixed sense of I and mine. This clinging feels natural because it gives us a sense of stability in a changing world, yet it quietly becomes the source of tension. When we believe there is a permanent self inside us, every experience becomes personal. Praise inflates us. Criticism wounds us. Loss threatens our identity, and change feels unsafe. The mind is constantly on guard, trying to protect an image that cannot truly be secured. The Buddha taught that this attachment is the root of dukkha, the unease or dissatisfaction that runs beneath much of human life. We cling to our roles, our opinions, our achievements, and even our pain, because letting go feels like disappearing. But suffering does not come from life itself. It comes from resisting its impermanence. When the sense of self is rigid, reality feels like an enemy that must be controlled. As awareness deepens, we begin to notice that experiences happen without needing to belong to a me. Thoughts arise, emotions move through the body, and circumstances change, all on their own. When clinging softens, suffering loosens its grip. There is less need to defend, explain, or justify ourselves. Life becomes something we participate in rather than fight against, and peace emerges not from holding on, but from gently releasing. Asterisk, the ego sustains itself through constant mental activity, especially through comparison, control, and continuous self-narration. It compares us to others to define worth, asking whether we are ahead or behind, better or worse. It seeks control by predicting outcomes, replaying past moments, and rehearsing future conversations, all in an attempt to feel safe. At the same time, it tells an ongoing story about who we are, what has been done to us, and what should happen next. This inner narration feels familiar, even comforting, yet it quietly keeps us trapped in the mind. In Buddhist understanding, this activity is not a personal flaw, but a survival strategy. The ego believes that thinking equals safety, so stillness feels threatening. When the mind becomes quiet, the usual reference points disappear, and the ego senses danger. This is why moments of silence can feel uncomfortable or even unsettling. At first, without the story, the ego does not know how to exist. As awareness grows, we begin to notice this pattern without immediately obeying it. We see comparison arise and pass. We feel the urge to control and watch it soften. We hear the story without needing to add another chapter. In these moments, something important is revealed. Peace was never hidden by the world. It was hidden by the noise we believed we needed to survive. Asterisk in Buddhism, awareness is not used as a weapon against the ego, but as a light that gently reveals its nature. The ego does not dissolve through struggle, discipline, or self-judgment. In fact, trying to force it away often strengthens it because resistance itself is another form of identification. Awareness works differently. It observes without pushing, labeling, or condemning. And in that simple observing, the ego begins to lose its grip. When thoughts are watched instead of believed, they naturally slow down. When emotions are felt without a story attached to them, they move through the body and pass. The ego thrives on being unconscious, on operating in the background without being questioned. Awareness brings it into the open, not to shame it, but to understand it. This understanding creates space between who we are and what we experience. Over time, this space becomes a refuge. We no longer react as quickly or as harshly. There is room to breathe before speaking, to feel before defending, to pause before identifying. The ego does not need to be destroyed because it was never solid to begin with. As awareness deepens, the ego softens on its own, like a knot loosening when the hands stop pulling. What remains is not emptiness, but a quiet clarity that feels grounded, compassionate, and deeply human. Asterisk letting go of the ego in Buddhism is often misunderstood as losing one's identity. But it is closer to laying down a heavy burden that was never required. The fear around ego dissolution comes from the belief that without the familiar story of me, there will be nothing left. Yet what Buddhism points to is not disappearance, but relief. When the grip of ego loosens, life becomes simpler, lighter, and more direct, without the constant need to defend an image. There is more energy available for presence and compassion. Actions arise naturally, without being filtered through fear or self-protection. Relationships soften because there is less need to be right or seen in a certain way. Even pain is experienced differently, not as an attack on identity, but as a moment passing through awareness. This does not make a person passive or indifferent, makes them more responsive and sincere. In this sense, letting go is a return rather than an escape. It is a return to a state of being that is open, flexible, and connected to life as it is. The self that remains does not need constant reinforcement to exist. It rests in awareness, steady and quiet. What is lost is tension. What is found is ease, clarity, and a deep sense of being at home within oneself.